Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 246. Thank you so much for tuning in. What'd you guys think of that debate on Tuesday? I guess it was so frustrating watching it. And I think that a lot of people got frustrated because there were so many opportunities for President Trump to, take the TKO. Even though he was debating not only Kamala Harris, he was also debating the two moderators from ABC Disney, where her best friend, one of her closest friends, the woman who introduced her to her husband, is an executive at ABC Disney. So that's why she was adamant about going on this network and doing the debate on this network. Trump had agreed to do 3 debates. He said he wanted to do as many debates as possible. He agreed to one on Fox on September 4th. She refused to do a debate on Fox. She doesn't want to go to any outlets where she's not going to have the inside track the way she does at ABC Disney, because one of her closest friends is a executive there running the network. So she won't go to places that are risky to her. She'll go to only places that are tightly controlled, where she has an inside track. And everyone saw what happened. The moderators were not fair. It wasn't surprising at all. You wouldn't expect, under the circumstances, that going to a network where one of Kamala Harris, who's the candidate, one of her closest friends, is the decision maker at that network. You wouldn't expect it to be fair, and it wasn't fair. Okay, so it was what was expected, quite frankly. Anyone who expected anything different, shame on you. It was what was expected. But even under the circumstances, there were a lot of opportunities for President Trump to take the knockout blow. And I'm just sitting at home and watching this, and she'll say something, or even one of the questions that are asked, the first question that was asked, do you think the economy is good right now? And she goes into, I grew up in a middle-class family and all that, we don't even know if that's true. Middle-class family, both of your parents were college professors. You grew up in Canada. You're Brahmin Indian. What are you talking about? But she never answered the question if she believes the economy is good right now. She never answered the question if she gets in and she says that she's going to restore Roe, which Donald Trump called her on it and says, no, you're not going to be able to restore Roe because you're not going to get it through Congress. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous hypothetical to say that you're going to get a bill to restore Roe through Congress. It's never going to happen. And he called her on that. He said that. But even if she was able to do that, the question was, if you restore Roe, at what point in a pregnancy will we be restricting abortions? She wouldn't answer that. She wouldn't answer that question, because the answer to that question is all the way up into viability. If we're able to get Roe instated, but she wouldn't be able to do it. But even in that back and forth, I'm sitting at home and I'm thinking to myself that the kill shot would have been, why didn't you guys do it in your first 2 years? Bam! Bam! You had both houses of Congress in Joe Biden's first 2 years. Why didn't you guys codify Roe in the first 2 years? Boom! And there were so many opportunities like that for him to take that shot, and he didn't take it. It was frustrating, but I don't think that debate is going to change anything. I think that Trump did very well. I love the point that he made when she tried to call him on the fact. Well, I have a couple of clips that are going to start. We are going to get into the financial crisis in this podcast. Like I said, I have a lot to share with you guys. Let's get into this. I do have a couple of clips from the debate. Let's take a look at this one first, because again, I thought that Donald Trump could have delivered the TKO right here. She's bragging about Dick Cheney's endorsement.
Talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know...
So she thinks that's a flex. She thinks that that's a flex. And she not only said that she's honored to have Dick Cheney's endorsement, she's boasting about it in the debate. I was blown away by this. Boasting about Dick Cheney for a Democratic nominee for president of the United States to be boasting in a debate about the endorsement of Dick Cheney is just... So there was another part of this that they go into where she calls out all of these former members of the Trump administration who are now not endorsing him. And then again, this is one of the moments, and Trump did get a lot of really, really, really good zingers in there. There was just more opportunities for that kill shot. Like right there, I would have been like, are you serious? You're boasting about Dick Cheney's endorsement? Like I would have gave her the kill shot right there. Bam. But he didn't. But when asked about some of these people from his administration who are now not endorsing him and saying that he shouldn't be reelected, he said, I fired them. I fire people. I thought that was really sharp, because he says that they don't fire anyone. That after Afghanistan, which was a debacle, nobody got fired. None of the generals got fired. He says, of course, they're writing books about me. Of course, these people don't like me. I fired them. I thought that was great. So she's boasting about the endorsement of Dick Cheney, Democratic nominee for president, boasting about the endorsement of Dick Cheney is just wow. And then she's also boasting about Goldman Sachs. And we're going to talk about Goldman Sachs today. We're going to talk about some Goldman Sachs CEOs who became Treasury Secretary. We're going to talk about some of these people and the role of Goldman Sachs in, our financial crisis that we had in 2008, but still the crisis that we're dealing with right now. But a Democratic nominee for president, not only boasting about the endorsement of Dick Cheney, but also the endorsement of Goldman Sachs. I mean, if this isn't evidence of the party realignment, what is?
I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's
So Goldman Sachs endorses her economic plan, and she says that Goldman Sachs says that Trump's economic plan is no good. So she's boasting about a Goldman Sachs and endorsing her economic plan. She's got the endorsement of Goldman Sachs. She's got the endorsement of BlackRock. She's got the endorsement of all the major corporations. I saw something the other day about how none of the Fortune 500 CEOs are endorsing Donald Trump. They're all endorsing Kamala Harris and Dick Cheney as well. She represents the empire, people. And that's what I've been telling you, that she represents the empire. She has the endorsement of Darth Vader. And we're still talking about the Bush-Clinton dynasty. And today we're going to talk about the financial crisis and the role that each one of these three presidents from the Bush-Clinton dynasty and the role that they played in this transfer of wealth out of the public treasury into private hands. The money didn't just go to nowhere, into the thin air. It went from the public treasury. As we went into debt, then this money went into private hands. And all three of these presidents, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, or 1 Republican, but if you include Bush's father in this dynasty, because his father is the patriarch of the dynasty, what you have here, and if you include the 4 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you have 32 years. These people represent the past 32 years of American history, and this guy represents 4 years. And they're telling you that the 4 years of this guy are the reason that your economy is in the shape that it's in, and your country is in the shape that it's in, and the division and everything. And even like I was saying in the last podcast, you can even blame him for all the problems in the world, not only the problems in the country, because of his 4 years. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So we're going to talk about the financial crisis today in this podcast. So to get started, I want to play this clip. This was a clip that Joy Reid of MSNBC, if you don't know who she is, I applaud you, actually, if you don't know who this woman is, but she is an anchor on MSNBC, and I want you to take a listen to what she says.
Can you explain it to me? Explain it like I'm 5. Why do you want that person to be president? And don't tell me because you had more money when he was president. That's not possible. We were in a recession. We literally, the economy was trash because of COVID. And even before that, the economy was Obama's economy. He literally just rode in on Obama's economy. He didn't do anything to change the economy. He was just living under Obama's economy and golfing every week and doing literally nothing. So it was Obama's economy. He just rode in on it. So he didn't do anything to make the economy better. Like, the economy did not get better. It's just bullshit to say you had more money. That's not possible, because during COVID, you had no money because no one was working. You were home in your basement.
Yeah, but the government was sending people $700 a week checks. What are you talking about? People had tons of money during COVID because they were getting stimmies in the mail, and they extended unemployment and gave people $700 a week to stay home. People had money during COVID. Yes, the economy was not good during COVID, but the part that I want to focus on that she says is that that Trump's economy wasn't his economy. It was Obama's economy, and that Trump was just riding in and benefiting from the economy that Obama left him. Is that true? And you may be wondering why I want to talk about the 2008 financial crisis and what that has to do with the American economy over a decade later. Well, I want you to understand that during the financial crisis, there was a lot of debate about, taking our medicine then in 2008, having a long recession. There were people that were saying that because of the financial crisis, that we should have had a long recession and really stabilized our economy in a way that we didn't have problems down the road. Everybody was talking about down the road, and that we're kicking the can by the policies that were implemented after the crash, that these policies were kicking the can down the road, and there was going to be pain down the road if we don't deal with, our economy and the structure of our economy right now. If we don't do this now and we just kick the can down the road, there's going to be problems down the road. Well, we're down the road now. We're down the road, and those problems that people were talking about because of the financial crisis in 2008 and the way that we recovered from that crisis and what the policies were to recover from that crisis, all they did was kick the pain down the road. They get rid of the pain. They just made it not painful for Obama's first 4 years, and they were able to stabilize the economy. But let's talk about what those people did, and let's get back into Larry Summers here. So if you remember a few podcasts ago, we were talking about the $1.9 trillion stimulus that Joe Biden passed in his first few weeks in office. This is the American Rescue Plan. We talked about the fact that there had been 6 different stimulus packages, or 5 different stimulus packages before this one that Congress had done for COVID-19. All of the previous 5 stimulus packages that Congress had done for COVID-19 had been done in a bipartisan manner, that the Republicans and the Democrats worked together to get those stimulus packages passed. This 6th and final COVID stimulus package that Biden did, they did it by themselves. Not a single Republican joined them. They did it with 50 votes in the Senate, and Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote. When we talked about this a few podcasts ago, we were talking about Larry Summers coming out and blasting the policy as the least responsible economic policy in the past 40 years, is what Larry Summers says. Least responsible economic policy in the last 40 years. And I was telling you that there was such a big deal for Larry Summers, who is a Democrat, Larry Summers to make this criticism of Biden and that stimulus package. And the reason why is because of who this guy is. And we're going to talk about who this guy is here in a moment. But the first thing I want to do before we talk about Larry Summers and who he is and his role in the 2008 crash, the financial crisis, and his role in the state of the economy today, before we talk about that, I want to explain why Larry Summers was calling this the least responsible economic policy in the last 40 years, and why he was warning that if you guys do this, it's going to cause inflation, which a few months later, this was passed in March. By June, inflation was up to 9%. So if you've ever heard this, I guess it's an analogy or a story about if you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, that the frog will jump out. But if you put a frog in a pot of lukewarm water and you slowly turn up the heat, that the frog will not notice the heat being, risen, and at a point he was staying there and like this is a nice little hot tub, and you can turn it up to boiling and boil the frog because he doesn't notice that this is happening because it's happening slowly. So that's kind of the game that Larry Summers and the guys who set up the crash and the loot job that these guys did. That's this theory of MMT, modern monetary theory. It's like a well-balanced science. The point I'm making is that if you add too much liquidity into the marketplace, and this is what Larry Summers was warning against, if you turn up the heat too fast and put too much into circulation, then the frog, the people, we're gonna notice that you're turning it up, and we're gonna notice that there's all of this liquidity out there. That's why he was warning against this, because he knew that it was a very balanced and a very what's the word I'm looking for? It was a very tenuous a situation with the debt. That if and they'd already done the policy of negative interest rates during the Obama administration. That's what Joy Reid here doesn't understand when she says that that Donald Trump just got Obama's economy. Well, the Fed policy during the Obama administration was different Fed policy than you had during the Trump administration. During the Obama administration, after the crash, the Fed was bringing the interest rate down to negative interest rates so they can boost up the economy, and then which was called quantitative easing. And then when Trump came in, then they started doing what they call quantitative tightening, and that is inching interest rates up a bit. And that has a lot to do with the economy. But that's why Larry Summers was warning against all of this spending, this stimulus, because he knew that it was like turning up the heat on the frog. That this was too much. This was too much heat. And it was going to cause a problem, which it did. And he warned about inflation. Now, who is Larry Summers? Larry Summers is a Harvard economist. He was the Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, but he wasn't Treasury Secretary for the entire Clinton administration. Clinton had another Treasury Secretary who preceded Larry Summers, and Larry Summers was his protege. And that Treasury Secretary was this guy. His name is Robert Rubin, and Robert Rubin was a Goldman Sachs CEO right here. Before his government service, he spent 26 years with Goldman Sachs, Robert Rubin. Robert Rubin resigned as Treasury Secretary in 1999. This is going into, in July of 1999. So this is going into Clinton's last year, that year of 2000, which was the election year. He resigns. And when he resigns, his protege, Larry Summers, becomes the new Treasury Secretary. Okay? Larry Summers was Treasury Secretary when this document, which I've talked about on this podcast many times, every time I talk about this, I bring this document up because this is very, very important. You need to understand this document to understand the motivation behind what these guys did. And this document is called Life After Debt. This is the actual document right here. It was retrieved by NPR through a FOIA request in 2012. Or was it 2012 that they got this? I think. But this is the document. This was a secret government document. You can see the date that it was drafted right here. November 3rd, 2000. So this is probably around the date of the election, November 3rd, 2000. So this is the date of the election. And if you remember in 2000, the election wasn't really settled for another 6 weeks, over a month later because of Bush v. Gore and the Florida recount and all that. But you can see the date drafted 11/3/2000. So the document is called Life After Debt. It even says right here in the first paragraph, in the year 2000, the U.S. Treasury began to actively buying back public debt. So let's listen to a little bit. This is a interview about this article, Life After Debt. I want you to take a listen.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Robert Siegel.
I'm Melissa Block. And now a story about a secret government document that dates from the Clinton administration, outlining what was believed to be a looming potential crisis. Not a matter of terrorism or national security. No, the crisis was, imagine this, the possibility that the U.S. might pay off its entire debt. David Kestenbaum with our Planet Money team got hold of the document and explains why it was buried until today.
The document is called Life After Debt. I heard about it from Diane Lim Rogers, an economist at the White House who reviewed it at the time. It was written in 2000, and Diane had not seen it since then, until I gave her the copy. For her, it brought home just how much has happened since then.
Wow. I mean, the document just reminded me of a lot of things I'd forgotten. Like, I'd completely forgotten that we were projecting that the debt would be completely paid off by 2012.
So this document, that was an internal document. Larry Summers was the Treasury Secretary, and he was one of the people. He had to be one of the people who was circulating this document as Treasury Secretary in those last months of the Clinton administration. So this is on election day, I guess, that the document was drafted. That comes out. You don't know who's going to win the election yet, but they're warning that and this is a warning. This is not viewed. This is what you got to understand, is that this document is not viewed as something positive. Like, yay, the United States is going to be completely debt free. Think about the things that we're going to be able to do if we're completely debt free. No, this document was viewed as a warning, as a problem, as a crisis that by 2012, says right here, the debt held by the public comprise holding of the Federal Reserve, foreign governments, private investors. This debt is scheduled for elimination by 2012. They were predicting that this number right now, that is $35 trillion and counting, would have been zero by 2012, that we were going to be completely debt-free, and it was viewed as a crisis. It was viewed as a problem. So Larry Summers, he was the Treasury Secretary. And these guys, during the Clinton administration, they set up the crash that took place in 2008. This is Larry Summers, this is Robert Rubin, and this is Alan Greenspan, who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Now, when did Alan Greenspan and where did he get his start in American politics? I didn't have this set up, but let's go ahead and show you where Alan Greenspan got his start in American politics. Alan Greenspan, American economist who served as the 13th chairman of the Federal Reserve. All right. Ooh, look at this. I didn't even know this. During his economic studies at New York, Greenspan worked under Eugene Banks and managing director at the Wall Street investment firm Brown Brothers Harriman. Oh, Brown Brothers Harriman. I didn't know. I didn't even know that Alan Greenspan worked for Brown Brothers Harriman, but that makes sense. Brown Brothers Harriman, you guys remember who also worked for Brown Brothers Harriman? Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush. This was Brown Brothers Harriman. This is a banking firm that was involved in the rise of the Nazis. I never knew that Alan Greenspan was with Brown Brothers Harriman, but he got his start in, God, where is it at? I can't believe it doesn't say it here. In the Gerald Ford administration. There it is right here. Like we were talking about in the last podcast, how Gerald Ford, who nobody voted for after he came in, and he brought in George H.W. Bush to head the CIA. He brought on Don Rumsfeld as his chief of staff and then Dick Cheney as at the head of defense. He fired a bunch of the Nixon. Here it is right here. He was the chairman of Gerald Ford's economic advisor. So Gerald Ford's the one who brought Alan Greenspan into American politics, but he worked for Brown Brothers Harriman. Makes a lot of sense now. Because, Gerald Ford, like I was saying in the last podcast, he sat on the Warren Commission. And the people who killed JFK are the people from Brown Brother Harriman. The mastermind was Averell Harriman himself of the Kennedy assassination. Anyway, so these are the men who set up the financial crisis. These men right here. Alan Greenspan, Larry Summers, Robert Rubin. So Alan Greenspan, let's listen to him. I've played this clip before. This is him talking about the economic philosophy of modern monetary theory. This is why I was explaining to you why Larry Summers was complaining about this $2 trillion stimulus, how that was turning up the heat too much on the frog. Listen to what Alan Greenspan says here. Now, what he's saying here, like I was saying, it's a really fine dance. It's a really, it's a really dangerous situation if you add too much heat too fast. So, but if you do it the right way, this is what Alan Greenspan believes about deficits.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. So there is zero probability of default.
Zero probability of fault because the United States can always print money.
Pay any debt it has because we can always print money.
Now think about this. I want you to think about this. That when this guy he was still the chairman of the Federal Reserve in 2000 when this document, Life After Debt, comes out. So this document is being circulated secretly in the Clinton administration in that last year. Larry Summers is the head of the Treasury. Alan Greenspan is the head of the Federal Reserve, and they're saying, and they're circulating this document as a warning that the United States is getting ready to be debt-free in 12 years, and we need to do something. Like, let's go back to this clip, what this woman says, that we need to do something to prevent that from happening.
The economy was booming. The U.S. government was actually running a surplus, taking in more than it was spending. This sounds like a good thing, and
sounds like a good thing.
It was, but it also posed a danger that this document was spelling out.
It sounds like a good thing, and everybody agreed that it was. Well, no, everybody didn't agree that it was a good thing, because if you look at the document says that it was a crisis, that the United States becoming debt-free was a problem, is what the document says. Not everyone agreed that it was a good thing. People like Alan Greenspan, who says that America can pay any debt, that the debt doesn't matter. People like this they did not believe that it was a good thing that the United States was getting ready to become debt-free in a little bit over a decade.
And everyone agreed it was, but it also posed a danger that this document was spelling out. If the U.S. paid off its debt, there would be no more U.S. Treasury bonds in the world.
No more Treasury bonds.
The U.S. borrows money. It sells bonds. So no more debt meant no more bonds.
And so that's how the U.S. borrows money. No more debt means no more bonds, but no more of that good interest either. Because when you borrow money at an interest rate. So who's getting that good interest, that interest on those Treasury bonds? That's the problem with the United States being debt-free.
Off its debt, there would be no more U.S. Treasury bonds in the world. That's how the U.S. borrows money. It sells bonds. So no more debt meant no more bonds.
And no more debt means no more interest. No more debt means no more interest on the debt, too.
Bonds for so long, has been in debt for so long, that the entire world has come to depend on those bonds. U.S. Treasury bonds are a critical reference point for the entire global economy. Banks buy hundreds of billions of dollars worth because they're safe places to park your money. There's a good chance your mortgage is tied to the interest rate on U.S. Treasury bonds. The Federal Reserve, our central bank, buys and sells Treasury bonds all the time to keep the economy on track. If you took Treasury bonds away, would the world unravel? Would it adjust somehow?
It was a dramatic issue. It was a huge issue for not just the U.S. economy, but the global economy. And that's why we felt initially that we had to address it somehow.
We had to address it somehow. What'd they do? How'd they address it? How'd they address the problem, the crises that they foresaw that the United States was getting ready to be completely debt-free in a little bit over a decade, in 12 years? How did they address that problem? She says they addressed it. How'd they address it? How did they address it? How did these guys address it? Now, Robert Rubin wasn't there anymore, but he had already done his damage. Listen to from the Bill Maher show a couple of weeks ago. He had James Carville on the show, and James Carville makes this boast about how many jobs Democrats created, and Bill Maher calls him on it. But take a listen to what he says.
I love you. I love Clinton. That's a bullshit thing to say.
Okay.
Because as we both know, am I right?
Yeah.
As we both know, jobs created, it has a lot to do with what the last guy did. Clinton got rid of Glass-Steagall. Did that have anything to do with the collapse in 2008 of the economy? I think it did. So maybe some of the jobs that were lost.
I'm sorry.
It's just a bullshit thing to say.
I don't think
So. Carville, who he was on the Bill Clinton campaign. I mean, he was Bill Clinton's boy. Him and Stephanopoulos on ABC basically ran Bill Clinton's campaign. So he's boasting about all the jobs that Bill Clinton created and his speech in the DNC. And Bill Maher calls him on it and says that and says basically what Joy Reid says about that the economy of the current president has a lot to do with what the president before him, or even the president, two presidents before him. I mean, what is done in the early years of the Obama administration, they have an effect on where the economy is right now. And I'm going to show that to you. And that's what Joy Reid says. This is what Bill Maher is talking about here. He says that Bill Clinton got rid of Glass-Steagall, and getting rid of Glass-Steagall had an effect on the crash and the economy that Obama got in 2008, is what Bill Maher said.
Because as we both know, am I right?
Yeah.
As we both know, jobs created, it has a lot to do with what the last guy did. Clinton got rid of Glass-Steagall. Did that have anything to do with the collapse in 2008 of the economy? I think it did.
So Clinton is not the one who got rid of Glass-Steagall. These guys. These guys got rid of Glass-Steagall. Alan Greenspan, Larry Summers, and Robert Rubin. Robert Rubin, let me just explain this to you, because Robert Rubin, the reason that they got rid of Glass-Steagall, so Robert Rubin worked as the Goldman Sachs CEO for 26 years before Clinton brings him on to run the Treasury Department. Robert Rubin gets rid of Glass-Steagall for Citigroup. That's the whole reason that they get rid. And let's explain what Glass-Steagall is. And really simple. We don't even have to go any further than this first paragraph. Hold on. Says Glass-Steagall legislation describes four provisions of the United States Banking Act of 1933. This is after the Great Depression and the crash in the 1930s. So this is the Glass-Steagall legislation describes four provisions of the U.S. Banking Act of 1933, separating commercial and investment banking. So that's basically what it did. I mean, if you were a bank that was involved in speculative activity where you're basically gambling then you had to be separate from people's savings accounts and commercial banking, that they had to be separate. So that's basically what it did. So these guys get rid of Glass-Steagall, and they get rid of Glass-Steagall for Citigroup. The purpose of getting rid of Glass-Steagall was to benefit Citigroup. Hold on. Here it is, right here. So they did it. So let's go back here and see if it says that they got rid of it for Citigroup, so you can see that before I show you that. That here it is, right here. While permitting affiliations between security firms and companies of other Federal Reserve member banks, Glass-Steagall distinguished between the Federal Reserve member banks could do directly and what affiliate could do. Whereas Federal Reserve member banks could not buy, sell, underwrite, or deal in any security except as specifically permitted by Section 16, such as a bank could affiliate with a company so long as that company was not engaged principally in such activities, and that's speculative activities. So where does it say here? Let's see, Citigroup. Anyway, the purpose of getting rid of Glass-Steagall was to benefit this company, Citigroup. So Robert Rubin, after he does that, after they get rid of Glass-Steagall to benefit Citigroup, when Robert Rubin resigns from the Treasury Department in July of 1999, and then Larry Summers becomes the Treasury Secretary, Robert Rubin left the Treasury Department and he joined Citigroup. He became the chairman of Citigroup. And then Robert Rubin, he bailed out of Citigroup just before the crash. I tell you, these guys looted. I mean, people don't even understand how these guys looted the country. All right, where does it say how much he got when he left Citigroup? In December 2008, right before the crash, in December 2008, because the crash is happening, or that's when the crash is happening. Investors filed a lawsuit contending Citigroup executives included Rubin sold shares at inflated prices while concealing the firm's risk. So they said, so he got out. Here it is, right here. Between 1999 and 2009, Rubin received total compensation, including employee stock options, of $126 million. So let me explain. So what I'm telling you is this guy, he set up the crash. They repealed Glass-Steagall. I'm going to play a clip here in a moment of Janet Yellen saying that the repeal of Glass-Steagall had nothing to do with the crash. No, didn't have anything to do with the crash, but the repeal of Glass-Steagall is why the crash wasn't, and the problems with the troubled assets that we're getting ready to talk about, why they weren't contained only to the banks that were operating in investment banking and speculative banking. It wasn't contained to only those banks. It didn't cause the crisis, no. But what it did do is it made it a risk for the commercial banks, the banks that had the savings and retirement funds of Americans. It made it a risk for the commercial banks because they had removed that wall. So the problem with the troubled assets that were in the banking, in the investment banking, spilled over. Those problems spilled over into the commercial banking. So Janet Yellen is technically right that, and I'm going to play that clip from her in a moment, that the repeal of Glass-Steagall didn't cause the problem, like Bill Maher says, but it accentuated the problem because the problem was not contained only to investment banking. But Robert Rubin is responsible for getting rid of Glass-Steagall for Citigroup. He leaves the Treasury Department, goes and works for Citigroup as a chairman, and then he bails out of Citigroup and sells a bunch of stock just before the crash in 2008. And it's a complete loot job. This guy from Goldman Sachs, they set the whole thing up. That's only part of it, people. That is only part of it. This is the clip of Janet Yellen.
Did we make a mistake moving away from Glass-Steagall?
I don't believe that Glass-Steagall was responsible for the financial crisis.
Answer his question. He says, did we make a mistake going away from Glass-Steagall? He didn't ask if it caused the problem. Notice what she's doing.
Did we make a mistake moving away from Glass-Steagall?
I don't believe that Glass-Steagall was responsible for the financial crisis. So I don't see that as a major issue that was responsible for the financial difficulties.
Did our move away from it contribute at all, or was it just irrelevant in your judgment?
Wow.
Well, look, the largest distress was suffered at standalone investment banks like Bear Stearns and Lehman.
So listen to what she's saying, that the largest distress were in a distress in 2008, which caused the problem, started with Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, that these are investment banks. But she won't answer the question, because the question is, did it contribute at all, the repeal of Glass-Steagall? And yes, the repeal of Glass-Steagall is why those problems were not contained in investment bank and spilled over into commercial banking, and why Congress had to bail out these banks. And we had to do the bank bailout, troubled assets release program. This is another player, too, that you need to know about. This guy, Timothy Geithner. Timothy Geithner was the head of the New York Fed during the financial crisis. But Timothy Geithner was also there. There we go. In 2000, in the Clinton administration, in the late Clinton administration, when these guys were deregulating everything and setting up the crash. Yeah, Robert Rubin, Larry Summers, Alan Greenspan, and Timothy Geithner was there too. So you got to know who this guy is. And I'm not going to really be able to get into the meat of this. We'll pick this up in the next podcast. I have about 10 more minutes left. I'm going to do as much as I can here, and we're going to pick this up. But what I'm doing here in this podcast, I'm setting what's called setting the stage. I'm introducing you to the cast and the characters. So that's why you got to understand who Timothy Geithner is because he's a member of the cast. He's one of the characters. You got to understand who he is because he was there in 2000 with Larry Summers, Robert Rubin, and Alan Greenspan, and he helped set up the crash. But in 2008, when the crash is happening, he is the president of the New York Fed. It says right here, as president of the New York Fed and secretary of the Treasury. He became secretary of the Treasury. I didn't want to let that out of the bag yet, but this guy became the secretary of Treasury. Geithner had a key role in the government's effort to recover from the financial crisis 2007 and 2008, the Great Recession. At the New York Fed, Geithner helped manage the crisis involving Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, and American International Group. So this is what Yellen says here, is that the major points of crisis that caused this crisis were Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. That's what she says. So she doesn't believe that repealing Goldman Sachs or repealing Glass-Steagall had anything to do with it, that it was Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers is where the major distress was, is what she says. Well, I mean, why wasn't it only contained to those banks? If that's where the major distress was, then we let those banks go down and then it's no problem. Why was it so important to bail out those banks? Well, Bear Stearns got bailed out. Lehman Brothers is no more. There will never be any Lehman Brothers ever again. But Geithner was there when all of this was going on in 2008. So what did they do? What did they do? They did the bank bailout, which is called the Troubled Assets Relief Program, or TARP is what it was called. The entire bill was Public Law 110-343, which included the act created $700 billion. That's the Troubled Assets Relief Program under the Emergency Economic and Stabilization Act of 2008. So this was the bill. This was a big deal back then, too. $700 billion. $700 billion is nothing today. I mean, when you're doing $1.9 trillion stimulus now, I mean, $700 billion is not that big of a deal. But back in 2008, $700 billion was a big deal. And this was the Troubled Assets and Relief Program, or basically Troubled Assets Relief Program and Emergency Economic Stabilization Program. So almost $1 trillion is what it is. So what did this bank bailout do? Let's read this. Purpose. TARP allowed United States Department of Treasury to now who was the Department of Treasury at this time? Department of Treasury at this time was this guy, Hank Paulson. Where do we know Hank Paulson from? Prior to his role as Department of Treasury, Hank Paulson was the chairman and chief executive officer of the major investment bank, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs is where Hank Paulson comes in. So Hank Paulson was the Treasury Secretary, who when the crash happened, he's the one who went to Bush and says that we got to do the bank bailout. If we don't do the bank bailout, the entire economy is going to crash. But repealing Glass-Steagall doesn't have anything to do with that. So TARP allowed the United States Department of Treasury to purchase and insure up to $700 billion of troubled assets defined as A. So there's two. The first definition of these troubled assets are A, residential or commercial obligations will be bought, or other instruments that are based on or related to such mortgages, that in each case was originated or issued on or before May 14th, 2008. Let me read that again. Residential or commercial obligations will be bought. So that's real estate. Residential or commercial real estate will be bought, or other instruments that are based on or related to such mortgages. So this is A, where this $700 billion is going to, is to purchase these mortgages, whether they're commercial or residential real estate mortgages, the purchase of which the Secretary determines promotes financial market stability. So this is going to be all determined by the Secretary of the Treasury, who was Hank Paulson. B, so we just read the first classification of troubled assets, and that's these real estate and mortgage assets. B is the important troubled assets that you need to understand. B, any other financial instruments that the Secretary, after consultation, any other financial instruments that the Secretary, after consultation with the chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. So Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke. Ben Bernanke was the head of the Federal Reserve at this time. So what Congress is giving them with this troubled assets relief program is $700 billion to go and buy any of this real estate, either commercial or residential real estate. But B was any other financial instruments that, and what are financial instruments, people? Securities, things like that. So it's not only, this $700 billion is not only so you can go out and buy and stabilize this real estate, commercial and residential real estates. It's also to buy financial instruments. So what are these financial instruments? We're going to talk about what they are here in a moment. Any other financial instruments that the Secretary of the Treasury, after consultation with the chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, Ben Bernanke, determines the purchase of which is necessary to promote financial and market stability, but only upon transmittal of such determination in writing to appropriate committees of Congress. So they had to work with Congress to also so it was the three groups. So you have to work with Congress, Secretary of Treasury with Hank Paulson, and then Ben Bernanke, who was the Federal Reserve. They got together and they determined any of these financial instruments. So what are these financial instruments that B in the TARP program are referring to? Because these are the financial instruments. They don't name what the financial instruments are, but these financial instruments are what brought down the economy, are the real reason that the economy was in crisis in 2008. And again, these guys set it up way back in the Clinton administration. These guys and Timothy Geithner. Don't forget about Timothy Geithner. Timothy Geithner. They set it up in 2000. And these were the troubled assets. This is an example of these troubled assets. Take a listen.
If this is $100 billion, then this is how much you'd have to pay to buy Apple today. This is the amount of all the gold in the world. This is the GDP of the entire world. And this is the notional value of all financial derivatives. They've become the biggest asset class in the world, so you should probably have a rough understanding of what they are, how they function, why on earth there are so much of them, and why Warren Buffett called them financial weapons of mass destruction in his
Financial weapons of mass destruction, Warren Buffett called these financial instruments, derivatives.
Biggest asset class in the world, so you should probably have a rough understanding of what they are, how they function, why on earth there are so much of them, and why Warren Buffett called them financial weapons of mass destruction in his 2002 shareholder letter, and warned that
derivatives could accentuate in a major way.
I just think it's interesting that Warren Buffett is giving this warning in 2002. If you notice, he's calling these financial instruments weapons of mass destruction in 2002. At the same time, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney are making the case that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which they didn't have. It was a lie. But at the same time, they're making that case and taking us into Iraq, we had real weapons of mass destruction, according to Warren Buffett, real financial weapons of mass destruction that were laying dormant in our economic banking system like landmines waiting to explode. And they finally exploded in 2008. Not by accident, though. We're going to talk about how these derivatives exploded our economy in the next podcast. But there were real weapons of mass destruction that were a threat to the United States of America, and they weren't coming from Iraq. They were coming from our banking institutions.
That
derivatives could accentuate in a major way a systemic problem that might even arise from some other phenomenon.
While at the same time, he also really likes to use them.
What's his history with derivatives?
Well, he has a checkered history with derivatives.
We have 200. I know every single derivative we own.
You don't know anything about derivatives? Good news, I'll tell you. Sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, and listen.
All right, so what are derivatives? This clip is going to explain what derivatives are, but even after the clip explains it, you probably won't understand because these are very, very complicated financial instruments. So complicated that even the CEOs of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers did not understand these assets or these instruments. But what are derivatives?
The word derivative comes from the word derive, which comes from the Latin word derivare, which actually comes from the ancient Egyptian word for nobody cares. In the case of financial derivatives, this simply means that you create a piece of paper which derives its value from a so-called underlying asset. Company shares, a house, crude oil, your student debt, no kidding, pretty much anything can be used as the basis for a financial derivative. Even, wait for it, another derivative.
Wow. So what derivatives are? They're contracts and they're derivatives of another underlying asset. So you have to know the value of the underlying asset to know the value of the derivatives. Again, they're very complicated instruments, and these are the instruments, financial instruments that are referred to in the Troubled Assets Relief Program B. You had two different types of troubled assets that the bank bailout targeted: the residential and commercial properties, which really aren't troubled assets because these residential and commercial properties, they still have value, even though the mortgages were, had problems with the mortgages and the people that controlled the mortgages. But you just take the property, and the property still has value. You can still sell it. It's still an asset. These derivatives had no value at all. They were absolute junk. And these were the financial instruments that took down our economy in 2008. Everyone thinks that it was the subprime mortgage market. No, it wasn't the subprime mortgage market. The subprime mortgage market only exposed the derivatives. And again, we'll talk more about this in the next podcast. Let's just play a little bit more of this clip, and we're almost done here.
A derivative is just a contract between two parties betting on the change in price of that underlying asset. And as the price of that asset changes, the price of this piece of paper, our derivative, changes too in some different way. The relationship of this price change to that price change is what derivatives are all about. It is the reason they are bought and sold every day in such massive amounts, for good reasons of prudent financial management and for crazy reasons of insane speculation.
Insane speculation. This instrument is a speculative financial instrument. So those who say that repealing Glass-Steagall had nothing to do with the financial crisis, they're crazy. Or they're lying to you like Janet Yellen, because she knows. These are speculative products that if Glass-Steagall was still in place, that these derivatives and the damage from these financial weapons of mass destruction would have been contained only to the speculative investment banks. But because they repealed Glass-Steagall, then it spilled over into the commercial banking market. We'll talk more about this in the next podcast on Monday. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.